So for today's video, I prepared a list with the most interesting interview questions that you should consider asking during your Amazon interviews. And I've done this list also based on my previous experience, but I mainly used three sources to get these the more interesting interview questions. And the first resource that I use is another YouTube channel called Work It Daily, and they actually have what's called the 4Cs method, and they actually give some examples around connect, around culture, and around challenges, and around close. So they give two examples for each of these four sections. So again, the YouTube channel is Work It Daily. The second resource that I use to gather some rather interesting information here is Misha Yurchenko's book Cracking the Amazon Interview, in which he divides these types of questions into again four sections: the position, the business, the team, and the interviewer. And he goes on to give some examples specifically for each of those sections. But what's even more interesting about Misha Yurchenko's book is, and the type of information that he gives there, is that he specifically emphasizes on the fact that you should be asking business-related questions during the Amazon interview. So they must understand that you have a commercial sense. In other words, you're generally interested to either make the money, either to save the money. So this is a very interesting piece of advice. And then he goes on with some even more interesting questions, more business-like questions that you may consider asking during any Amazon interview. And the third resource that I wanted to talk about here is another book that I reviewed previously, that of Dominic Black, the Product Manager Interview, into which he categorizes these questions that you could consider asking into the ICJC method that comes from industry, company, job or role, and the company and values. So again, these are some four elements and some four interesting questions, which I will give you more advice as I go into specific examples when it comes to specific roles about the Amazon interview. So now that we have the 40 questions to pick from, let's look at some examples, some role-specific examples. And I took 10 possible roles for which I'd like to share some examples with you. The first one is probably that not many of you are considering applying for. That is a public policy role, which interestingly I've coached people for. And the first question would be, how do you see AWS increasing its market share in the next 3 years in our location or region? And these public policy roles between us are usually in an AWS context, so that's why you would want to ask this question. The second is, I'm curious to know why this job is open. Is this a new role due to growth, or is this opening due to other reasons? The main reason why you want to ask this question, of course, because you want to see how do they go about hiring for this role. But you should be very, very careful, and probably this is why I also mentioned it for the in a public policy context at first, because what you don't want to look like is that you are the type of person who says, hey, but are you just looking to replace someone, or is this a good job? Because the reactive approach from an HR person would be, hey, that's none of your business in the first place. But if you know how to ask this question, it can be very, very revealing, although it's a tough question. The third question here would be, who are your biggest customers? Are you happy with the existing retention rate in this region? And you'll see that I also use this question for sales roles, for example. All right, moving on. The second set of position titles is a lot more popular with my YouTube channel. That is a product program manager roles, both for technical and non-technical flavors. And the first question would be, over the years, how do you think the industry has changed? What do you believe the outlook for the industry is? Needless to say, this makes a lot of sense especially for a management role where you are genuinely interested on where the company is going, and probably even more interesting here, as I earlier referenced in Misha Yurchenko's book, questions should be business driven. So you should showcase that you have a commercial acumen when applying for a job to a company such as Amazon. So Okay, maybe this question is not the best example for sales, for a commercial acumen, but at least you are in a business-driven, business goal-driven environment. So the second question would be, what are the future plans for this company? What specific are they planning on doing next for products and services in terms of growth? So Amazon is all about growth, so they're most likely going to appreciate these types of questions, which again can be very easily linked with the business context. The third possible question could be, what are the major challenges for this role? How does this role resolve those problems? While this is not necessarily a business context, it touches upon some very important points here about the challenges in the role. And especially for senior roles, I would very much recommend you to ask tough questions. This being said, as for the public policy example, try to get your questions worded properly. And this is very important, but so long as you manage to word them properly, your questions could be and should probably complex questions, because after all, you will get asked about your failures and about your challenges and about your weaknesses. So you should employ some of the same strategy when answering them questions. And finally, the fourth question is, what kind of culture does this company have when you look at it? How do teams work together and make decisions on a daily basis? So, of course, at a company such as Amazon, it's very important to have to be a great team player and to understand the dynamics of working in teams. And just a side note, I will also link all these examples in text in the video description, so no need to take too many notes right now. Next, the third position title I want to talk about is customer support. And the first question is pretty straightforward. How do you measure customer service? How is performance measured in this company and in this position? What specific KPIs do you use, and are they weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, etc.? So I believe this is a question that makes sense. I believe it's self-explanatory. What important initiatives are you working on for the next 6-12 months? Now you may say, hey, but a customer support person does not necessarily have to be a visionary. Okay, but still, I believe that this would be an interesting approach for many people, because Amazon's power statement on their website is "We pioneer." So I believe this question might be an impactful one also in this case. And finally, who is the most successful hire recently and why? And the reason why you want to do this is to ask them this is because you want to see what drives success, and success sells. And whenever you're talking about success, you're playing on your strengths actually, indirectly in this case, but still I believe it's a good way to approach these types of conversation. The fourth position title I wanted to talk about here is data science roles. And the first question, a pretty obvious one, how much data is to be handled in this role? What volumes of information are you dealing with here? The second is, what are your goals for this role? So especially for data science roles, as you see, it sounds more like a research-based approach in a business-driven context. So I believe it's a question that should give them the signal that you're you're an outcomes-driven person, and this is essential, especially for a data science role. I know from experience that the most people that I talked to that were applying for data science roles are excellent system thinkers, but not so business-driven people. So probably this would be an interesting differentiator if you're going for a data science role. The third question, I'm curious to know why this job is open. Is this a new role due to growth, or is this opening due to other reasons? Again, a strong question. I would only use it if I'd be applying for a senior role here, for a senior data scientist. And finally, why did you decide to join Amazon? And I'm not sure how interesting is this question, because the obvious answer would be because Amazon is the largest company and we have the largest data sets, and it gets interesting. But you never know what kind of stories you'll find out there, because usually the people who work at Amazon are pretty interesting people. So I think this still makes sense and is a good question as well. The fifth position title will be for finance and accounting, and again, to be clear, I'm copy-pasting everything of these examples in the video description, so no need to write them down anywhere. The first question would be, what software do you use? And I know that especially in finance and accounting there, it's all about the software that they use there. There's a lot of back and forth with these things. The second question, how will my performance be evaluated? So as you know, the finance and accounting are not necessarily the most innovative areas in a business, but it is very much a goal-driven, a business-driven, an outcome-driven space. So yeah, I believe this also is an important question. What important initiatives are you working on for the next 6 to 12 months? So this could be actually a synonym question to I'm curious to know why this job is open. Is this a new role or due to growth? So this is another way that you could interestingly find out more about this role and about the context, and whether if this is a great job or just a good job. And what are the 3 most important principles for this job? So these last 3 questions are all touching upon the quality of the job and what are the most interesting success factors in this role. And of course, these what are the 3 most important principles for this job could apply to many other roles. The 6th position title would be human resources. What important initiatives are you working on for the next 6 to 12 months? Again, a typical HR question, but still a very important one, especially because it talks about their goals and within a business-driven context. What HR software do you use? So Amazon used to use for many years external software, and recently they are developing that software more and more in-house. It's probably the same as they do with the databases in their back and forth with Oracle. But it's always interesting to know what kind of HR software they're exploring these days, and especially for the job that I'm doing. I mean, in a digital context, it's very interesting how to use software as an accelerator for this thing. And why would they consider this an interesting question? Is because everyone uses HR software nowadays, and Amazon they do screen resumes with software, in case you didn't know. So but anyhow, why did you decide to join Amazon? This will be a very revealing question. This will help you to find out whether your team will actually be a high-performing team or so. So by asking an HR person this question, I can tell you from experience that's a very revealing thing to do, and it is a tough question for HR to answer usually. So that's another reason why you should consider asking it as well. What have been the biggest challenges this year for the team? Now, as any great storyteller, they will probably give you a longer answer here, of course, if the context matters. But challenges are something, there's in HR there are all sorts of challenges for global businesses, such as at times it's super difficult to hire in certain markets, and especially in a digital context, it could be only a matter of employing the wrong recruitment marketing strategy there. For example, I've seen when managing HR software, I've seen people struggling to hire in certain markets because they were advertising their jobs on the wrong ads marketplaces. So by looking at the biggest challenges here, you have a fair shot at diagnosing the problem, and of course diagnosing whether if it's something that you can fix or not. And again, especially in the case of HR, I mean, if the job doesn't sound like too appealing for you, then don't go for it. That's as simple as that. Now, the seventh position title I want to talk about here is marketing roles. For marketing roles, I have 4 examples. What is the approval process for making decisions in the company related to marketing in this case? And if you've ever worked in marketing, you'll know that this is a very important element of the day-to-day operations for these things. So that's why I believe this question makes a lot of sense. Why did you decide to join Amazon? Again, a typical question, but it might be more relevant in certain situations than others. What CRM systems do you use to track information? So usually companies use CRM systems to manage all sorts of information, and ideally you should have a few CRM systems that you're familiar with that are already in your CV. So when they tell you more information about this, you could easily relate to that and actually play on your strengths again. Can you tell me more about the members of the team? This is the main success factor of a marketing team, its members, in my opinion. Probably after the decision-making process, the budgeting stuff. But yeah, again, so these will be the 4 questions that I believe make the most sense for marketing roles. Number 8, for sales positions. The first question would be, who are your biggest customers in terms of revenue? What is your customer retention rate, and what are your customers like, and how do you communicate with them? And how much time do you typically spend with them? So asking them about their customers is actually a very good thing, because that shows that you care about the business. And the more you show them that you care about the business, the more likely you are going to make a good impression there. So that's the first one. How does success look like in this role? Again, a typical goals-driven thing. What important initiatives are you working on for the next 6-12 months? Again, to understand what's going on, what's the dynamic of the thing, and eventually also spot whether if it's a new or replacement position. What specific tools will I be using in this job? And this might make more sense for some roles, more for the others, but if you believe that there could be some tools that you are not standard or are unexpected, there could be something unexpected there, just consider it as asking it again as well. Number 9, the 9th position title is software development engineers, finally, and solution architects together here. How do you define success for this position? What metrics are you using to measure my accomplishments? A pretty standard question, but still it's a business-driven question, and this is very, very important, especially for junior roles. The second example, how does this service product fit into the bigger picture? This shows that you are a mission-driven individual, so you're the type who gets excited about the mission values of the company, which is very important, especially for software development engineers. What important initiatives are you working on for next 6 to 12 months? This shows that you have curiosity, which again is a very important thing to showcase during the interview. And what are your favorite and least favorite things about working here? So this touches upon job fit. So if they will ask you for job fit on whether they would like to work with you, you should also ask them questions that would help you to determine whether you would like to work with them or not. And these types of questions, what are favorite and least favorite things about working here, is the type of question that reveals a lot about these things. And finally, number 10, security engineers. 4 examples. What important initiatives are you working on for the next 6 to 12 months? The reasons being quite obvious. You want to look like a forward-thinking person. And the fourth question is this a new or replacement position? So this is a synonym to the first, because if they answer what important initiatives are you working in the next 6 to 12 months, this more often than not will give you an idea whether if it's a replacement or a new position due to growth. The second question would be, what have been the biggest challenges this year for the team? Now with security engineers, you cannot ask them, how do you measure success here? Because, within a security context, it's pretty obvious. You will have some some very specific, some job specific KPIs, but don't go general with these things, because security is pretty obvious. Like, okay, if you fail to secure it, then yeah. And finally, what is a typical day looks like in the role of a security engineer? And this is one way to show that you're generally interested in you as a fit there. So you are looking for job fit, and that probably they will also think to consider giving you more information as to your learning possibilities at Amazon, which is something that you of course always want to emphasize on, that you're a continuous learner. And yes, so these are the examples that I wanted to talk about in this video. I believe the amount of information available online is also considerable, but the one main takeaway here that I have for you is that first you should take them seriously, these questions that you should ask them, because there are many instances where hiring decisions are made, especially at this point in time. And consider this: these questions you likely have the opportunity to ask them towards the end of the interview. And towards the end of the interview is where two things happen. First, that you're tired. So unless you have some strong questions, you won't remember them. And the second thing that happens is, by the end of the interview, you'll get a good idea on what's it like to be interviewed by those people, and you'll have a much better idea on whether you need to just do some to ask them some normal questions, or you must risk it all to ask some questions that would either make or break your application. So this is why you should prepare them in advance. And I remember in Misha Yurchenko's book, he recommends preparing between 10 and 15 questions. So probably I wouldn't go with 10 and 15 for a phone interview, but for the on-site interview, sure, why not? I mean, you could easily go through the main areas presented for each role, or you could go back to look at the three methods that I talked about in the beginning of the video, and look and take more examples from there. But the main reason why I've done this video is to give you a starting point for your role with as much as insight as information as I know. So hopefully you found this video useful, and as always, thank you very much for watching.